donner à voir. Voilà. Alors, ça va pas prendre la
streets where they were located. Cool. So it's on my YouTube channel and my Facebook, and if you guys are interested in any of this, specifically in this neighborhood, check out that episode. It's called Madame Curie, who discovered radiation.
Right.
She's in there. They say her remains are still glowing because she was exposed to so much radiation.
She discovered it, didn't
she? She didn't know how bad it was for her. There's actually a story of her and her husband who lived here in. I just randomly go talking to myself. That looks familiar, that street. So it's looking directly behind me is what you're looking at. Now, one thing you'll notice right away is that Paris used to be, this is the late 1800s, plastered with signage everywhere.
Right.
And a lot of them were hand-painted, unique, one of a kind, done by the best artists around, selling anything from lamp oil to perfume to petrol to hot chocolate or silk. And you can see some things haven't changed. For example, on the left, this building, if I zoom in, the shape of the iron on the balconies, do you see that?
Mm-hmm.
Still the same there.
Yeah.
Smaller.
And the reason I point this out, this whole idea of things being covered, look, there's still a little bit of a leftover there. And the reason is because up top there was a factory that hand-painted signage for businesses.
Oh, yeah.
And it's nice that a little bit of it has survived and been restored. Whatever you were presenting, right? You can see leftover evidence from the 1800s. And this one in particular, we can tell that they were selling wine. And two reasons we can see that. Well, first of all, it's security. Pine cones was a symbol of wine, selling of wine. And the reason is, to use a sign with text was rather useless back in the day, because up until even the early 1800s, people couldn't read. Mass illiteracy throughout Europe. So if something said cafe, library, hotel, it's kind of useless to have the word. So always a visual cue was used. Why the pine cone for wine? Because they would store wine back then, not in individual bottles, but in large oak barrels. And the barrels had to be sealed and made watertight with pine pitch, with sap. So the god of partying, drinking wine and
So it's basically you have there.
You can see the limestone is usually pretty solid, although it does deteriorate. And if it gets infiltrated by too much water or pollution, literally this is turned to dust.
And is limestone from this area, or do they have to bring it in?
Yeah,
here?
in fact, Paris would have never been as beautiful as it is had they not, 2,000 years ago, randomly, unbeknownst to them, they installed Paris on top of a huge quarry of limestone, like a huge mass of high-quality limestone. So all they had to do to build the city was dig underneath. However, that's not a great idea if you dig too much under the city and build heavy stuff on top. Because in the 1770s, it was a Saturday afternoon just before Christmas, and an entire neighborhood in Paris started to rumble a little bit, and a whole block of houses all of a sudden went swallowed up by a sinkhole 65 feet into the ground. Several deaths because they didn't realize they were just digging out huge caverns beneath the city. And once that happened, they realized, oh shit, there's the Louvre, there's Notre Dame, there's the Palais Royal, like all these beautiful buildings that could just one day vanish. So they had to go and they had to retrofit foundations under all of those stone quarries. I don't know if you've heard of the catacombs of Paris, where they put all the skeletons and stack them up and stuff. They used those former stone quarries that had been there for hundreds of years, because there's literally a Swiss cheese of tunnels running beneath us, especially in the Latin Quarter. So the universities got permission to away from Notre Dame and spread out into the Latin Quarter. And at some point at the peak, there were over 40 or 45 colleges here. And you could finally get a proper education and actually make something of yourself. Those original classrooms, though, didn't really exist. They had to give their lessons out in the open air on these various streets. So I want to show you an image, an engraving of the Latin Quarter. And if you look closely, they spread hay out on the street, and the students would be sat on the hay as the professor gave the class. I mentioned that right here, and of course everything was in Latin, hence the name of the Latin Quarter. I mentioned that right here because the name, if we zoom in here, it says the schools of the Rue du Foire, and that's the very street that we're on, if you look at that. What's cool is that the word foire is derivative of an old French word that means hay. The European. This is a cinema. And they have, this happens a little bit in the US as well. They've had that tradition since 1978 of screening the Rocky Horror Picture Show every single weekend without fail. Still doing it, still going strong, and when you come see this on a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, you don't just sit and watch the movie. Of course, it's a musical. Every time there's a musical number, there is a troupe of actors that's hired by the cinema to dress up in costumes and interact with you and sing along and spray you with water and throw rice at you, and it's a whole interactive experience. This is a little bit before my time. I was never a big Rocky Horror guy, but those who love it can come here and celebrate it every weekend. St. Julian. And in the by Julian manages to kill his parents by mistake. You may ask yourself, how do you go about killing your parents by mistake? I don't want to give you guys any ideas here on Earth. But Julian was a hunter, avid hunter. He went out to the forest one day to hunt. His wife was at home. She hears a knock on the door, unexpected visit from his parents, Julian's parents. And so they're weary from their journey, and the wife says, well, come in and use our bed to take a nap. So they do. Julian comes home, doesn't know his parents are there, sees two people in his bed, assumes that his wife is cheating on him, and in a fit of rage, murders the two people and realizes, oh crap, that was my parents. So to repent for that sin, he gives up all of his earthly possessions, and he and his wife move next to a river. And they decide they're going to take a boat, and for free, they're going to ferry orphans and lepers and the poor across the river as a good deed. One day, this decrepit leper comes up, and he's all covered up, and he asks for passage across the river. They pop him in the boat. Halfway across, the leper reveals himself to be Christ, Jesus Christ, coming to pardon the sin. And that's the exact moment that we can see up there. Christ is standing up. You can see a halo behind his head if you look closely. And that is the story of St. Julian. It doesn't help us know what the heck they were selling in the shop. I'm pretty sure it wasn't those little sparkly Eiffel Towers. There's the view I was talking about. The scaffolding up there was there originally before the fire because they were doing work on the roof, and I guess eventually they'll take it down because it's been compromised. Yeah, well, it happened in the early 80s, so I wasn't here personally. I was already on phone. I watched it on TV. The next day, I think there were a lot of people. This is excessive. There's even a beautiful railing in downtown town.
Really?
food supply, so famine for 133 days in the city. Parisians were resorting to eating, animals from the zoo and sewer rats and their dogs and cats, right? But also the Prussians cut off the water supply and destroyed the aqueducts. So all of a sudden there's no fresh water to drink in the city. There was a rich British philanthropist living here. His name was Richard Wallace, and we call these Wallace fountains named after this guy. He decides, I'm going to use my money to design and cast 50 of these iron drinking fountains and reestablish the system of water for Parisians. When he did that in 1872, he didn't just do a boxy rectangular drinking fountain that would have done the job. He created a work of art that would enhance the landscape, and that is such a Parisian type of thing. The four women here represent four ideas: charity, kindness, simplicity. The fourth one's interesting: sobriety. Why would one of them represent sobriety? Because when they ran out of water in Paris, everybody turned to the wine they had in their cellar. Men, women, and children were constantly buzzed on the streets of Paris, and it was a real problem. So one of them represents sobriety. Imagine that this would go right down to the river, and the river would literally just wash up against the end of the street. It was seen in the 1400s. A black cat that would dip his paw in the ocean fishing in the river Seine. At the same time, there was a priest who had lived in this area called Dom Perlet, and for whatever reason, rumors spread throughout the city that he was practicing dark black magic. He was transforming himself into the black cat, fishing in the water. It got so well known, this rumor, that sadly a few students at a nearby university decided to kill the cat one day and destroy this black magic. And the priest all of a sudden wasn't seen on the streets anymore, and so they thought, okay, well, mission accomplished. But then, days later, the cat was seen again, alive, on the opposite bank of the river, fishing again. And the priest at night would be seen walking the streets, and they said, how do we get rid of this? These dark arts, this curse. In reality, it was probably two cats, right? Two different cats, and the guy was just coming and going, and whatever. But that's why we got the name of the super.
Is that why you see a lot of big shops?
The cat was always part of for the culture, for sure. They have the same superstitions as we do, for sure. But the black cat thing comes from the fact that the cabaret, the Chabois cabaret, was famous for shadow puppets. So they would project these silhouettes of puppets, against the screen, and one of them was a cat. And so that's where the black cat comes from, the shadow puppets that were being projected. Asking about the origin of that name, the black cat cabaret. Here, St. Michael is always doing the same. He's always stomping down on the devil, and in this case, pointing up to heaven to remind us which team he's on. It's a glorious fountain that was, in fact, from 1860, about the time of Abraham Lincoln over in the States when he was president. The final glass fountain that would be placed on the side of a wall. After this point, they would start placing them in the center of intersections and roundabouts. And because this one is facing the north, it happens to be in the shade quite often. The sunlight doesn't tend to hit it. So they tried to pump it with a lot of colored marble to give it a little bit more vibrance, knowing that it would be in the shadow. Glorious sort of gargoyle-y type of creatures. Rousseau. Four ladies are the cardinal virtues that you see represented on the fountain.